Alright, welcome back. So this video is to capture all the post-update work that kind of happened from the last video. So the flex fuel sensor install, the crank trigger disc install, the brake upgrade, and a few little pieces of add along the way, and a big update to do with the last lot of tuning, as unfortunately when I made the last video the car was supposed to be getting tuned that week, but there was some unforeseen circumstances at the workshop and it just wasn't able to happen. However, got all that done yesterday and been a pretty big success, so I can go through that. Yeah, got some cool stuff for this video. So one of the things I was getting done was the brake calipers rebuilt, resprayed. So got the just in the standard red, got all the Brembo stickers put on yesterday as well. So those have come up an absolute treat. Yeah, look quite nice. Weren't too many major issues with the calipers. I think the biggest thing is the brake fluid was a bit shit, because it got much better pedal feel now. But yeah, quite happy with that came out, because the guys down at the workshop were able to get that done. I think they've turned out quite nice. Still got the standard Brembo brake squeal, unfortunately, but it is what it is. If I get some spare cash, I just want to throw out some brake pads to try a couple different sets, then we'll do that later on down the track, but just gotta deal with it as is at the moment. But standard Evo Brembo brake life. Alright, so let's start with the flex fuel sensor. So down here you got the flex fuel sensor that was installed. So now we can do fuel temp and fuel composition, and that is utilizing the Benchmark Solutions airflow meter adapter that you can see down there, if we can get some light without putting my fat hand in there. So that's just using on the left hand side, that's the stock wiring from the vehicle. So that would otherwise just do all your, like your airflow meter, your barometric, I think there's like +5 and 12 volts, sensor ground, and intake air temperature. So that all just goes back through the standard wiring harness into the plug and play adapter for the Heltec, and then obviously into the Nexus S3. So yeah, just rewired some stuff back into the Heltec because I disconnected a few things that weren't in use. Yeah, that worked perfectly fine. Configured it on the Heltec, and yeah, can now read fuel composition and fuel temperature. The one big advantage from that is mapping the fuel density against fuel temperature. So that has been able to provide effectively what that will change is more consistency in your fuel trims. So as the fuel temperature changes, it should be more in line with your volumetric efficiency. So the efficiency shouldn't change, and all the other parameters that do change, like temperature, fuel temperature, coolant temperature, that sort of stuff, all the trims and corrections can work, and realistically it shouldn't have, or not realistically, it shouldn't make any drastic changes to your volumetric efficiency or your base fuel map. So certainly seeing that's working pretty well. Likewise, now that I can measure fuel composition, when I do get to the point of tuning it on the E10, then it's all good and set up. The other big one in the fuel in the engine bay was the crank trigger disc. So this is the stock crank trigger disc, and you can check out Benny's website, Benchmark Solutions, or check out my previous video to see what the replacement disc looked like. However, you can see this essentially has two massive actual I don't know what you want to call that, teeth on there, teeth, and yeah, massive gaps. The cam sensor is also a 2-tooth cam sensor as well, I believe. But yeah, holy fuck, like legitimately, the change in driving performance is absolutely phenomenal. So from the last video that week, the work that got done with the brakes, the trigger disc and the flex fuel sensor, so they Dyno did all the changes in the ECU. Literally the first drive just going down the street was instantly different, and for the better, mind you. The pickup now in the auto, where it used to be exceedingly slushy under like 3000 RPM, night and day difference. The amount of resolution that 18-tooth trigger disc now provides, I would say theory, but I believe what's happening is now that there's more crank triggers, it knows electrically where, well, the ECU knows electrically where the motor is mechanically for ignition timing. And I believe that's where a lot of the benefit has come from, and where a lot of the now sharpness in driving comes from. Like, absolutely phenomenal change. So even under light throttle loads, it is exceptionally responsive now, where you used to be able to like put your foot in to accelerate. It felt like absolute arse, and probably the main reason why a lot of people, if they drive or get the opportunity to drive a GTA by comparison to a manual, along with the insanely taller diff ratio, which is a 3.3 in this thing by comparison to a 4.5 or a 4.6 in a manual, yeah, it feels exceedingly shit. Now with that crank trigger disc, absolutely game changing. I would be as bold to say that if you put a manual ratio diff in this thing, in final ratio, kilowatt for kilowatt, I genuinely think you wouldn't be able to pick the difference between the auto and the manual. Like, that is how much of a difference this thing has made. It's absolutely insane. Not to mention where all the fueling issues that I've had previously, like this thing used to absolutely piss and bellow fuel out the back end of it, even on the stock ECU. Like, it was absolutely insane. So the timing was correct on the stock OEM ECU. Put the Haltech in, I checked the timing, the workshop checked the timing, it was all set up correctly, and I never thought that was an issue as to the fueling issues on this vehicle. I purely was generally going down the path of it's got too much fuel, which is why in the last video I showed such a drastic change in the fuel map. Now, after the trigger disc went in, the first fill up that I did in the vehicle, the fuel economy was trending towards 14 litres per 100, because the fueling on this thing was so pig rich, it would foul plugs in about 3,000 to 4,000 Ks, and I could actually see that trending in the fuel economy. It was just slowly creeping up over a period of time, which is always a good reason to track your fuel economy, because you can pick these things out and just see what the car's telling you. So the last fill up that I did before the car went in, it was like 13.8 litres per 100. Filled the car up after the tuning, so it was all fresh, good to go. It came down to 12.5 litres per 100. I genuinely could not believe it. It was absolutely phenomenal. I'm like, the thing's got more power, more response, and it's taken over a litre of fuel out of the vehicle. Yeah, fucking, I don't know what magic sauce Benny puts in those things, but Jesus Christ, I personally could not highly recommend them enough. The sad part of it is you have to run it on an aftermarket ECU, which is probably fine for the manual guys, and they're from the people I've talked to that have them, the manual Evos with the trigger disc, mind you, sorry. They notice the same sort of pickup under 3000 and just better responsiveness and just ironing out a few weird kinks with running an aftermarket ECU on an Evo. But yeah, absolutely game changing on the auto. Yeah, I would, trying to just look over the dyno graphs and just where things at. I just, from the bum dyno and just a little bit of research on my car, at least anyway, with just all the previous experience I've had and just the dyno graphs and just everything else, I would say it's picked up in the vicinity of 10 if not 20 kilowatts in the lower half of the RPM range. Like, it's been that significant. And mind you, when the trigger disc went on, it still retained the stock ignition and the stock fuel maps. So the fueling was not changed. So all the benefits have come from better resolution for timing. Yeah, I mean, it is completely and utterly changed your car. And if you've been on the fence about getting one of these trigger discs, if you've got an aftermarket ECU, and that is the key thing, so this is not going to apply to most of the GTA owners, because as far as I'm aware, I'm the only Evo 9 GTA owner with an aftermarket ECU doing engine control. The 7 guys, I think there's like 2 or 3 maybe, and I don't believe they're in Australia. So, which is a bit unfortunate, but yeah, for the manual guys, if you've been thinking about it, yeah, I strongly recommend. And to save yourself some money, if you were to get the workshop to do it, so buy the disc, get the workshop to do it, it's probably going to set you back about $1,000, purely for the fact that they've got a shit ton of labor to do to basically pull the timing belt off, pull the crank trigger, pull the crank wheel off and all that sort of stuff. So there's a bit of labor involved. However, if you're coming up for a major service on your car and you're running an aftermarket ECU, grab one of the discs, and whilst everything's apart, slap it in, and it's going to save you a butt ton of money, and you're going to get a heap of benefits out of it. I don't think there's any or minimal amount of cons to running this trigger disc. So yeah, can't speak highly enough of it. Yeah, absolutely game changing. It's yeah, I'm well happier with the vehicle now. Everything's kind of coming to fruition, which is absolutely fantastic. So I've probably glazed enough on the trigger disc. I can show you what the spark plugs looked like before the trigger disc, and we'll take a quick look at those now. So hopefully you can see this okay, but this is typically what the plugs would look like. So this is just a BR80S, the 7s, so the slightly hotter plug can cause knock, so it is recommended to go to an 8, and that should remove any knock that you may be having if you're running a fairly stock to mild setup. But yeah, these things you can see down there, the insulator, you want to call it that, around the conductor. Whilst it's not coming across on camera, but yeah, very, very dark, basically alluding to the fact that it was running very, very rich. So, which isn't a surprise, and honestly by that point these plugs were done well and truly by about 4,000k, if not 3,000k, just due to how much fuel was going in. So I have put in another set of these in now. I pulled them out just before the dyno tuning. They are, yeah, considerably cleaner. Mind you, they've only done about 500 k's, so keep an eye on that, see how we're going. There is an alternate plug, at least in the coppers, that you can run, which is the BPR ATS. So at the moment I've just got BR ATS. So the big difference here, I think it's called a projected tip. So it, oh my god, the focus. So it does stick out a little bit more. Whilst the same temperature range plug, these apparently may run a little hotter, but apparently it provides a better flame front due to the fact that this is in or deeper set into the combustion chamber. So just by comparison, get this thing to focus maybe. So you can kind of see just how much it protrudes out. So I am keen to give these a go. It's got a fresh set of plugs in it right now. I'm thinking I may just keep the non-projected tip in for the meantime, and then next winter maybe run these things to see how we go, just due to the extra fuel that gets put into this thing, just to compensate for the colder air temperature. So yeah, curious to experiment to see like a winter plug and a summer plug potentially, and kind of just map the fuel economy and see what happens. Likewise, I'm probably going to go down to the shops today, go grab an actual proper spark plug gap disc just to get some consistency. I've just been doing the old hacksaw blade trick, and just stuff around with the gaps. So potentially running a slightly larger gap may help with the economy as well, but things I'm willing to try and give a go. Spark plugs are fairly inexpensive, so yeah, it's kind of the next path where I'm at with that. Alright, so mods that, we'll call them mods, upgrades, additions, we'll call them mods. Put on a Plazmaman hot side intercooler pipe. Yeah, well, unfortunately you can't see too much, but I can at least show you what the stock one looked like. Not that there's pictures and videos all over the internet. So this is the stock J pipe, bit of silicone will attach from there to there. This is probably the one piece that's a bit of an Achilles heel for most of the Evos, because this is just so freaking tiny. That's a 40mm internal diameter. Then it kind of expands out a small amount. However, the Plazmaman hot side goes from 40 to 60mm. So yeah, huge improvement for airflow and releasing any sort of back pressure on the compressor side of the turbo. So pretty much now on this thing, running a K&N panel filter, which sounds quite nice. Got the Monster Sport intake turbo pipe down in here. So that's now a metal intake pipe, so that's a bit smoother by comparison to the rubber one, along with my airflow meter adapter, which the dummy one, sorry, which provides a bit better air velocity, because it's just the guts of it are opened up. Then into, you're not really going to be able to see, but into the compressor side of the turbo, and then the hot side intercooler pipe. So pretty much am where I am with the compressor side of the turbo for trying to make it breathe a little better, and then the next huge expense would be working on the exhaust to relieve any back pressure on the exhaust turbine, because it is always a balance between your compressor and your exhaust. It's one thing to be able to cram a shitload of air into the intake and into the combustion chamber, but if that air can't get out through the exhaust side and then through the exhaust turbine and out your exhaust, you're going to cause a lot of back pressure, and that back pressure, potentially depending on your power level, will cause a lot of detonation and just, it's not a happy fun time. So you've got to do everything in moderation and do everything in balance. I've priced together an exhaust for this to get manifold, dump, 3.5-inch exhaust, cats, resonators, mufflers, all that sort of fun stuff, and that's going to be about a $5,000 expense. So that's later on the list. It's not stopping me from driving the car or making it unsafe, so at this point that's just on the back burner. But pretty much done on the intake side. The cold side intercooler pipe, realistically there's no massive problems there. It's got enough diameter to flow the power that this thing's putting out, and the boost pressure, mind you, and the stock intercooler is fine. The other cool little addition that I made to the vehicle, because we are running the Heltec, so that's all been going pretty good since I put the bracket in. You can actually see the CAN connector there, so that links into the Heltec CAN system, so you can run displays, dashes, CAN expansions, all that sort of fun stuff. So whilst it's a $700, I think it's $600 gauge, if you would add up all the individual gauges that this thing can do, it is a very cost-effective solution. So and it's as simple as just literally running the factory loom CAN connector and then plugging it all in and just set up the gauge. So I'm monitoring intake air temp, battery voltage, O2, coolant temperature just on my primary interface here, TPS percentage, map pressure. Got one set up for ethanol content already, along with O2. Got my short and long fuel trims, vehicle speed, because the dash is a little bit out, so it's a nice little safety, so you can measure wheel speed, again, which comes straight off the ECU. And we're back to the first page. So Andro Motorsports makes a mount. $150 is, I don't know if it's a bit how you're doing, however it is a very nice quality product. They claim this to be a 52mm gauge holder, and this is supposed to be a 52mm gauge. However, there is slop, I'd say a couple of mil in radius difference, and and no means to kind of secure the gauge. So all I've done is essentially put in a essentially this stuff here, like the foam tape. So that had enough thickness, and I could put that in there where the gauge is, like, you can give it a little turn and get the thing in and out fairly good, but it's fairly secure. So just, yeah, be mindful of that. Also, the early editions, this was blanked off, so you didn't get the air vent. They've since updated this bracket, or this mount holder, gauge holder, whatever you want to call it, to incorporate the vents, which is a very nice touch and kind of adds to the professionalism of the actual product. And I don't know if we're going to be able to see it too well, but essentially that little back part there is internally is like an open triangle, if I could put it in a way. So there's enough room to feed your cable up in there and then into the back of your gauge, and then there's plenty of depth in the holder itself, so you're not bending cables and stuffing anything. So yeah, had to remove that, remove this trim piece, remove the dash, remove all of this trim piece, remove this, and that just gave me enough access to feed the cable through in a safe manner, and then basically plug it into the ECU, and yeah, configuration was not difficult. So yeah, yeah, hung the expense with that, just seeing some of the vitals of the engine with the sensors that I do have, and yeah, that's been a huge benefit. So yeah, the hot side intercooler pipe, the gauge, they've been the newest additions apart from the workshop additions. And I think it's probably about time to go have a look at the new dyno charts and have a look at the new fueling map. So remembering from the last video, I had a fairly aggressive adjustment to the fuel map, essentially halved the amount of fuel coming out, because now it was no longer a fueling issue, it was an ignition timing issue. Ignition timing, yeah, I guess you'd call it that. That was basically resulting in incomplete combustion, which is the reason why the amount of fuel is coming out the back. So we'll go have a look at those and see the uplift and the few changes that have been made. So the current map that I have up in front of me is the fuel map that was in the vehicle prior to going to tuning. Again, for the most part, this is just still the stock ECU AFR map. I modified the kind of the idle air fuel and then just upped the primary load area from 14.7 to 14.8. So nothing hugely different. It just allowed during these transition areas to run a slightly leaner air fuel, but I mean it's about like 0.1, 0.2 if that. So yeah, this was the stock AFR map. A few of the things that I mentioned from the last video, things that I had noticed was when you're giving it a fair amount of beans and you're getting out into like this area over in here, where it was trying to target 9.7, 9.5, apart from the huge amount of fuel that was coming out the back, and this is also pre-trigger disc, and running 17 or targeting 17 pounder boost, the fuel injectors were going to like 110% duty cycle, which is not good. Basically, yeah, it could not deliver the amount of fuel that it needed to. So once the trigger disc went on, it cut in the vicinity of about 40 to 50% duty cycle out of the injectors, just from better ignition timing, or at least the better ignition resolution. Absolutely crazy. So where it was never able to get under 10 to 1, I did see 9.7, 9.5 on the odd occasion. So again, still hitting just over or at 100% duty cycle, but those situations were few and far between. But yeah, just an insane difference that trigger disc wheel made. So the big thing was now knowing more information where it wasn't too much fuel, it was just poor ignition resolution and timing. I redid all the new fuel map to basically take half the amount of fuel out. So where there was up to basically a 20% correction up in these higher areas, now it was limited to about a 10% correction, going down to a 0 to 10 across the map, and still maintaining the same shape. So this is the old map, and now this is the new map. So you can see the overall shape remains virtually the same. I'll get to the dyno graphs in a second, but essentially this map now it's still conservative. Like, there could be more fuel taken out. It'd be talking like single-digit percentages on a duty cycle, and overall it's running about I'd say 11.2, 11.3 across the rev range. So essentially this up to 10% leaner fuel mixture probably took out, I'd say about 0.5 to 0.6 of fuel across the rev range. So where it would target across the rev range, which you'll see on the dyno printouts in a second, like 10 to 9.5, it's now targeting about 11 to 11.3. So definitely still on the conservative side. I don't have any fuel pressure sensors for checking those sort of safeties or oil pressure. It's still running the stock Mitsubishi knock sensor, which it does a job, but it could be better. And along with, from what I've been informed, the Heltec knock control probably isn't as good as probably some of its competitors. So unless you're very, 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 very confident in your fuel tuning and ignition tuning, just erring on the side of caution here, and it's still being fairly safe. So definitely some changes in this load area here, which I'll be able to report back once I've gone through a few tanks of fuel, just to see if there's been any significant changes. And this is kind of what the reduction in AFR looks like. So up here, not quite taking out a whole point of AFR, and you can see it just slowly tapers off, and obviously maintaining the overall fuel map shape as well. So whilst it doesn't seem like a significant amount, like 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, when I was messing around with a few things and just having a look into the trims and the gain and stuff like that, it can make a significant difference. So considering this is a primary load area and it transitions, whilst it's not here constantly, it transitions through there, but it transitions through there during almost all of your driving. So hopefully over a tank of fuel, fingers crossed, looking to see some better figures. So keep an eye on that. But yeah, overall, fairly conservative still. There could be some more fuel to take out. I may stuff around with the percentages and see what's going on, and just do some on my own, but I've got a few things to look out for now, at least anyway. So so previously targeting 16 pound and then 17 pound, ended up just dropping this down to 16 pound on the new AFR map, again just to take some of that duty cycle out. So now the injectors are in that low 90% area, whilst the turbo can certainly, it's nowhere near at its limit for boost. The fuel injectors and all the pump, I wouldn't potentially say the pump, because, well, without a fuel pressure signal I wouldn't really know, but at least the injectors are pretty much at that limit, with 16 pound targeting the specific fuel ratio that I displayed before. So you could take a little bit more fuel out to try and target maybe that 11.5 or even that 12 to 1, and that may gain you back that 17, maybe 18 pound of target boost to still keep the duty cycle under 100% for the injectors. But I think that would be about where the upper limit is with this fuel system on the GTAs and the motor. So it now maintains a pretty consistent 16 pound. Yeah, the wastegate, duty cycle, yeah, this is the old one, this is the new one. It's doing stuff or work. So that's what I was saying, like there's still plenty more to go as far as pumping boost into the thing. But again, you're only targeting this once you're at wide open throttle at high engine speed. So you're not driving there every day, all day. So yeah, I'm really not concerned. The only reason why we looked at it is in the event that you do give it a blunt, it is still safe. Yeah, so yeah, new fuel map, really keen to see how this goes. Let's get into the dyno charts and just see the performance that it picked up. Just off the rip, just ignore those torque figures. I'll explain that when we get to the other sheet. So the slightly less dark line was the stock ignition map, stock fuel map, before the new fuel map went in. So you can kind of see where the stock fuel map is wanting to target. This bit of a rise here was due to the fact that the duty cycle was getting too high, so it wasn't able to put in the amount of fuel that was needed. But you can kind of see where it's targeting between 10.5 and 11 to 1. That was on the Dyno 02. Taking out or using my new fuel map, it did exactly what I was expecting it to do, to basically try and level this out and basically bring the tail end of the AFR up without taking too much fuel out up in here, which is why there's more of a percentage crease here than what there is here. Obviously the base fuel map, with all these corrections here, that was the fuel trims just coming in, so that will smooth out over time. So you can kind of see with that 0 to 10% reduction of fuel, it brought it up by about half a point. So there's still potentially more to be had, or target that 11.5, which is still fairly safe. Going pretty 12 to 1 still may be safe if you've got enough knock correction control. But there's room for improvement, and obviously we can see how we go. The boost, yeah, dark line is targeting 16 pounds, so that's pretty much across the entire rev range. You can see up here where it was previously targeting about 17 pounds from the about 5,000 RPM onwards. Alright, so just ignore this first part. This was just into the ramp run. So I would say from about 3250 to 3500 is an accurate representation of what we're looking at. So the 136 kilowatts, that was with the stock AFR, stock ignition map before the changes, and with the trigger disc on. The couple of previous times that the car had been to the dyno, they were estimating it about 130 kilowatts, if not maybe just slightly less. So there has been a performance improvement by putting the trigger disc on, even with the stock ignition and fuel map. When I first put in the new fuel map, it went from about 136 kilowatts to about 142 kilowatt. So there was a 6 kilowatt improvement pretty much across the entire rev range, just by taking that little bit of fuel out, and with the better ignition timing, or the ignition resolution, targeting the same boost as well. Yeah, about a 6 kilowatt increase. Whilst not huge, it is a measurable difference, and at this lower level is significant enough. Like, you're talking a 5% improvement in power for about a 10% reduction in fuel. So one thing that I've been trying to do is trying to keep, I wouldn't say keep it as OE as possible, but keep it to the same shape, same performance. That way the gearbox is looked after. There's no stupid spikes in torque. Just ignore that for the meantime. Early on in the rev range, that was just as it was coming onto the dyno. So this is what the factory torque curve looks like. It's fairly flat and then tapers off towards the higher RPM. Likewise, the GTA, it will have a general increase in power and then peak about between 6 and 6.5 in the rev range. So this is still following the same trend. So the dark line is obviously where it's wanting to target 6 pounds, so there's a slightly less increase in power up here. Correction, where it was targeting 16 pound. So if that was 17 pound, it was slightly higher, but again, it was just to save the duty cycle on the injectors. So overall, just removing the fuel had a fairly positive improvement on power. Mind you, this is still running 16 pound is still stock boost pressure from the stock ECU, and the minimal enhancements to the compressor side of the turbo and a stock exhaust, and stock fuel system on 98 octane. It was crazy to see a 7 kilowatt jump to 142. So all things considered, looking back at what the car was with the stock trigger disc and the stock fuel, that would have been a 12 kilowatt increase from essentially taking a small amount of fuel out and better ignition timing. So yeah, absolutely crazy what can be had. So realistically, there would be no reason why you couldn't get 150 kilowatt, 200 horsepower out of these things with very minimal effort. The biggest restriction is the fuel, which is a bit unfortunate. So yeah, overall, very, very happy. Keen to see how the economy goes now. And yeah, absolutely love driving the car around. So that's probably a bit of a long video, a bit of a talking head. Hopefully that's been informative. Oh, the one thing that we did try to do, so once we've done the fueling, I wanted to mess around with the ignition timing just to see where it may or may not have wanted some changes. Didn't do anything in the higher end, primarily targeted just the typical driving loads. So like 4th gear at 60, 5th gear at 80, 5th gear at 110. Able to run it up onto dyno, those vehicle speeds at particular gear, selected the cells around that load area, modified the ignition by +5 and then -5 from where it was factory, and there was no change in torque, no change in fuel economy. So the stock ignition map, all things considered, for the particular load areas, is pretty spot on. It's pretty good. So again, there is savings to be had with taking some fuel out of these things. Particularly now with the trigger disc on, the ignition is considerably better. So that might be helping things as to why there's now no deviation going plus or minus 5 degrees of timing in those particular load areas. So yeah, see how the economy goes. I may stuff around with the AFR a little bit more just to see what it's like. But yeah, absolutely loving it. Pretty keen. Hope you've learnt something. Get out there, drive your cars, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.